We'll go down to the Orlando bubble itself. Live from Orlando is Brian Mahoney, Associated Press NBA reporter. For all his great work on Twitter at Brian C. Mahoney. Brian, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes this morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Brian. How about yourself?
We're hanging in. We're doing well. Definitely doing a lot better now that the NBA playoffs have started and these great games are going. But Brian, I'm curious. You're down there in the Orlando bubble. You're one of the few people with the experience. What's it been like so far?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've been here a lot shorter time than a lot of other people. I just started about a week and a half ago, and I have kind of the second stint here through the end of the first round of the playoffs. And it's a wall-to-wall basketball during the day. You'll have 4 games going in the playoffs now, and then the other 4 or 5 teams will be practicing throughout the day. So. From pretty much the time you wake up to almost the time you go to bed, you can find some basketball being played somewhere.
Is there any time for activities? Because you hear about the players, they're playing golf, they're fishing. Is there any room for activities from the reporter's perspective?
Well, not much, but a little bit. I did get out a little bit, but there's only so many places we can go. Obviously, it is the whole campus environment, so the only sort of stuff we can do is things that is basically booked through Disney that are kind of on the campus. We can't go out to the mall, but for a dinner or something or a golf trip that maybe they arrange for us, that stuff is okay. So they're trying to keep us with some things to do, knowing that it's they're certainly being away from home. It's hard for anybody, players or otherwise.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's at least they're giving you something. But it sounds like I said, 4 games a day, basically starting the afternoon all the way to night. Practice in between. Sounds like there's enough basketball to keep you busy. So I'm curious. So last night, sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're at the Mavericks Clippers game. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. I was there.
So I'm just curious, watching Luka Doncic, especially in person these last few nights. I guess my question is, especially with the Clippers and how great defensively they are and the struggles they're having, is the only thing stopping Luka Doncic right now is foul trouble?
Well, I mean, you look at his numbers last night. They're still great numbers. They had 28, 8 and 7, somewhere around there, and he's only played about 10 minutes in the second half. So to show what he can do in such a limited amount of time. And, watching game 1, I thought as good as he is, he could be in a little bit of trouble early on in that game. The Clippers are certainly trying to bang him around, switch a lot of defenders on him, be physical with him, all the kind of things he would do to rattle a great player, especially a young player, 21 years old like he is. But he showed he can handle it. He turned the ball over a lot in that game 1, but he still made a ton of great plays. Kept the Mavericks in it almost till the end. And then yesterday when he was on the floor, he made a great impact. He'll have to, watch out for the fouls, just like he had to watch out for the turnovers after game 1. But he's such a good player, such a smart player. I think he'll learn to adapt, and I look forward to seeing the rest of the series.
We're talking with Brian Mahoney, Associated Press NBA reporter. Find Brian on Twitter at Brian C. Mahoney. So, Brian, we started today's show, at least, with discussing who should be the favorite right now, right? Every year so far, there's always one team that's the clear-cut favorite in Vegas. First time since 2015, there has been no favorite. That was before the playoffs started. Now you watch, obviously, the Bucks drop game 1 of the Magic. You see the Clippers easily. I mean, if Porzingis isn't teed up for a second time and ejected, we could be talking about the Clippers in an 0-2 hole right now against Dallas. And the Lakers looked abysmal, I mean, to say the least, in game 1 against Portland. Is there, out of those 3 teams at least, or maybe it's another team in your mind, who is like the favorite, who should be the favorite right now to win the title?
Well, I thought going into the season, I thought going into the bubble, it was Milwaukee and the Clippers in my mind. I thought those were the 2 best teams. If you base it on an overall, I'll still stick with that. Now, if you're saying who looks like the favorite based on how they're playing in the bubble only, then you would say Toronto against Portland probably, which, those have been probably in the east or the west. Certainly Toronto has been, pretty much head and shoulders above everybody who's still playing right now. They've only lost once. So it's, you really have to sort of, when you're, and I know, in Vegas' mind, it changed a little bit. They had gone away from the Lakers to the Clippers, and who knows what it's going to be today after the Clippers lost. But it's, you really have to decide if you're evaluating based on what you've seen in the last 3 weeks or the last, 8 or 9 months. And that's hard to do a little bit.
So I'm just going to ask, so it sounds like, still for the most part, you're still relying on the whole sum of the year. You're still going back to, just pure talent, sounds like, with the Bucks and the Clippers. Despite, like you said, despite their struggles in the bubble, you're not taking against the results so far through the first 8 seeding games and 1 or 2 playoff games, depending on which team you're talking about. You're not taking those results, at least, I don't want to say too seriously, but they're not changing, for the most part, your outlook on a championship contender so far.
It's a good question a little bit, Ryan, because it's a little bit of both. With the Clippers, I still think I'm their talent overall. I think part of their struggles here has just been not getting their talent on the floor. Obviously, Lou Williams had to leave the team for a little while. Montrezl Harrell was gone for a long time after the death of his grandmother, and now Patrick Beverly is hurt, and who knows how long he'll be out. So I'm still going with the Clippers based on what I believe when they're on the floor. With the Bucks, a little different because they have not played really well in the bubble, and Toronto has. And I will allow right now to say a little bit. I'd be more wavering on the Bucks than I would on the Clippers because even if the Bucks do play well, Toronto is going to play well too, and that's not going to change. So certainly, I think the gap is narrowed there quite a bit.
Talking to Brian Mahoney live from the Orlando bubble. So I'm curious, Brian, you hit on you're concerned a little for the Bucks. The Lakers play as well today, both in an 0-1 hole against their respective teams. Who do you think needs to win more today? Is it the Bucks or the Lakers?
I think the Lakers need a win a little more because Portland's playing so well right now. I wouldn't want to fall behind them 2-0 and then have to beat them, 4 times out of 5 games. Even if the Bucks fall behind 2-0, they're still better than the Magic, and the Magic aren't healthy, and I still would have a hard time believing Orlando would win that series even with a 2-0 lead. But if Portland goes up 2-0, they're healthier. They're probably deeper. They're certainly playing better. And I would start to wonder if the Lakers could pull this off if they don't win Game 2.
I was looking at the Lakers because, like you said, right, they've really, since they've gotten out of the bubble, showed nothing, really any comments they can even just be a championship-level team. Their three-point shooting has just been, putrid, and that was exacerbated on Tuesday night. They can't score. They're struggling to score, and really, outside of LeBron and AD, if they don't have essentially massive games, there's no one right now consistently behind them scoring and contributing. How much concern do you have that they might not even make it out of the first round, let alone, beat the Clippers, beat the Bucks, and win the championship? Just what's your concern right now that they might get upset in the first round?
Everything about this year is so amazing that I don't think anyone would be totally stunned beyond all belief if the Lakers lost. They're playing a team that, had 4 months to get healthy, who brought back guys who were out, and who knows what they would have been able to play if they even would have made the playoffs in the first place if the season had continued.
Right.
Portland now is just everything that we thought they could be. And the Lakers, look, they've been playing without Rondo. He's supposed to come back maybe as early as tonight, but, remains to be seen. And there's just not a lot of depth behind those guys. And right now, top to bottom, the way Portland is playing, they wouldn't surprise anyone if they beat any team.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is interesting to see the Lakers, all the hype, and it's just LeBron. It's just, I don't know, I guess it sounds like, or it looks like, I should say, that break, he's so great at pacing himself. That break kind of threw off maybe his equilibrium or his whatever, because the whole team is kind of just taking his lead and not really playing too well. So, Brian, I'm curious, since you're down there in the actual bubble, what's it like? Because at least for me on TV, it feels maybe that, the virtual crowd or trying to give a team a home court advantage, I don't know if they're pumping the music in a little louder, or maybe it's just, me just making things up, but I'm curious. Has the NBA tried at least to make a legitimate home court feel in the playoffs by whatever it is, the music louder, the fans being louder, or, does it feel any different from the playoffs than it did in the seeding games actually in the arena?
Not to me at all. I think the NBA is doing everything they can to do that. Making it, as loud as they can within reason, and trying to make it feel like a team has some home court, but they don't. And quite honestly, just the way this is with no fans and games all day and night, it today doesn't feel any different than last Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day it is. So the fact that the playoffs started, it doesn't feel any different basketball-wise on the floor than it did. And I certainly think that affects the contending teams. Those teams should be playing at home right now with home court advantage in their own building, and they're not. And look how many top seeds we've seen lose already. I think Toronto, top of my head, might be the only one who's played 2 games and is still undefeated. So it's a tough situation for them who had to play their way through it, and it's not easy to do.
Talking about Brian Mahoney, Associated Press, NBA reporter. So I'm curious, Brian, do the games, I guess, feel less intense? We always hear players talk about that playoff intensity. It's different in the playoffs itself. Do you get that feeling being in the arena, seeing the players? Does their mindset, does their intensity ratchet up? Or, like I said, is it tougher because it really feels like, just maybe even a summer league game just feels like a regular game?
I think in some games you've seen that. I think the playing game when Portland played Memphis, I thought that was really intense. A couple nights earlier when Portland beat the Nets in their finale, those were must-win games, and you could feel the intensity there, I think. But over the course of every game, no, not at all. I think I was at Miami and Indiana's game one. That was an afternoon game, and they played each other twice in the seeding games. It didn't feel any different. That's just the way this is going to be, unfortunately, and it is hard. You don't find yourself, I don't think it's possible to find yourself totally locked in like you normally would, whether you're watching on the side, whether you're on the court playing, coaching, whatever. It's just a different atmosphere.
I'll take the atmosphere actually one step further, because I know, at least after game one, I heard Jamal Murray do an interview, and he said that he mentioned, right after that game where him and Donovan Mitchell both went off, obviously they cross pass after the game, but then they go back to the bubble and they cross pass again. I'm curious, since you're down there, since you're on the campus, kind of talk with these players before the game, after the game, is the attitude at all changed? Because now, if you get intense, if you get beef with someone on the court, you go to your respective hotels, you really don't see anyone, but now it's, you're all going back to the same area, you're all in the same hotel or two. Has like the intensity, or I guess the attitudes of the players changed at all now that you're going to see that person after the game more times than not?
I mean, maybe some guys might be able to block that out and still treat it a full playoff intensity, like, hey, that's the enemy. But I think most guys, it's hard. They don't have anyone else to talk to. Their family and their friends aren't here, so the only guys you talk to are the people within the bubble. The only people you talk to, in person anyway. So. Whether if it's a opponent of another team and someone you're playing, I mean, you're going to say hello to them and probably chat. It's just the circumstances here make it hard to block that out. Although, unless you're going to stay in your room all day and only talk to your teammates, but that's hard to do.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. We're finished up here with Brian Mahoney at Brian C. Mahoney on Twitter. So Brian, I'm curious, because it sounds like, at least in the East, it sounds like for you, Toronto is that team, outside of the Bucks, that could really give them a run for the money, make the finals. That's a team that's, not the Lakers, Clippers, or Bucks that we all thought coming into the season. I'm curious, out of the West, is there a team outside of the Clippers, outside of the Lakers so far that you've watched in the restart, that you watched so far, whether it's a game or two, I know it's a small sample size, that you watched to see, okay, this team, maybe it's the Rockets, maybe, I don't know if it's the Jazz or if it's the Nuggets. Is there a team outside of the Lakers or the Clippers so far that you think can make a real run to the finals out of the West?
Well, based on the way they've played, it would be Portland. Now, now again, they still have to beat the number one seed just to get out of the first round. So, I don't want to all of a sudden make it seem like I'm picking them to do this. But based on the way they've played, certainly you could say, sure, I could see them getting out of the West. And, you can never rule out the Rockets. Obviously we don't know how long Westbrook will be out, but they still, have Harden. They still have a system that nobody wants to play against. They have to overcome the size they play with, of course. But, again, in this most unusual situation, it could be an unusual team that wins, and that certainly gives the Rockets some hope.
I was just going to ask, because I want to ask this about James Harden, because this is a kind of theory I was floating with, or at least talk myself into, I should say, because I want to like the Rockets. I like James Harden. I want to buy into that they're a real title contender. So I'm curious about this perspective. James Harden, year in and year out, always leads the league in minutes. And I feel like sometimes toward the end of the year and in the postseason, because he never comes off the court, those legs get tired. You need your legs to shoot threes, and that's maybe the part of the reason why he struggles, at least scoring wise, or needs a lot of volume, I should say, to score the amount of points he does in the playoffs compared to the regular season. Are you buying it all that maybe this 4-month layoff, he has fresh legs? You saw game one that the Rockets as a team shot well. Do you think that maybe that could be the difference? Fresh legs can maybe be the difference for the Rockets and James Harden specifically, and make more shots and maybe be a legitimate threat to the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, whoever they, if they get out of the first round here.
It's definitely a reason why I give him hope, for sure. We've seen that the last couple of years where, yes, he does wear down, plays an unbelievable heavy workload during the season, and now he's had 4 months off. So, certainly if they keep going through the playoffs, then, yeah, they're still playing every other day, and it's only natural he would start to get tired. But, again, getting tired now after only playing for a couple months versus getting tired versus playing for 6 months. So it is a reason to say, wait a minute, all the things I want to say negatively about the Rockets, I have to take that one off the list because this year is different than what we've seen in that regard.
That, Brian, this year is definitely different. The first 3 playoff games alone, it's been, parity has been the word that's really been missing for the NBA playoffs for a long time. And this year, the bubble, the wacky circumstances, the no home court, everyone in the same place, it's definitely brought a lot of parity so far, at least, to these playoffs. Brian Mahoney, Associated Press NBA reporter. Again, follow Brian on Twitter. He's in the bubble at Brian C. Mahoney. Brian, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes here. Enjoy your time in Orlando and enjoy just the craziness so far.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.